Hi again, one more instructional video for you. This one is on part one of the annotated bibliography assignment. There's actually two parts to this assignment. The first one is shorter and the second one is a little bit longer with more synthesis. Now, I understand that you have already had experience with annotated bibliographies in your first summer residency courses. This is just slightly different, and so I wanted to note some of the similarities and differences from what you've already done. So, you are going to choose 5 articles, and I mean choose, not pick the first 5 you find. It's fairly obvious to me as a person grading these things when people have spent time looking through the literature base and picked articles purposefully and not just the first 5 that came up on their feed. Also, it's also pretty obvious when people just copy the abstract and call that their annotation. Obviously, I look up these articles, and an abstract is not an annotation. And there's a couple of things that we're looking for, especially in this assignment, that might be a little bit different than the last annotated bibliography you've done. So, of course, it's APA 7, and the only thing I'll say about APA 7 that I see people commonly do incorrectly is it is a hanging indent, so you might want to look that up if you haven't already used that. They are done in alphabetical order in an annotated bibliography, so not in order that it makes sense to you or that you found them or the year. They're alphabetical by first author, last name. And they also, the annotations, APA 7, the things I see done wrong are italics especially. So the italics should be the publication, not the title of the article, the publication. So educational research. And then the volume number should also be in italics. Be picky about it because the academics that read your articles, those things stick out like a sore thumb if you're not doing it right. It might seem like such a minor detail, but it shows just a little bit less attention to being careful. And so it makes you look a little sloppy if you have problems with your annotations at this point in APA 7. Also, there's no, if you're putting the website in, we prefer DOIs. Those are very nice for us graders to be able to click on to find the article. But if you need to put the URL in instead of a DOI, some articles still don't have DOIs, then please don't put the phrase retrieved from, because that's APA 6. We've gotten used to now not doing that. Also, there's different ways of doing multiple authors now, which is actually much easier than APA 6. So pay attention to those kinds of things because your graders, including me, but all of them from now on, will pay attention to it. If you're not doing it correct, it just looks a little sloppy. So be careful using APA 7. Some of the computer programs will do it for you, but they all make mistakes. So you're going to have to be the proofreader for the program if you have one that does it for you. A summary of the article in 3 to 5 sentences, and we're not talking long sentences here, right? Because you only have a page for each annotation. You want to talk about the issue that the researchers explore, the type of research conducted, and so these should be research articles, not opinion pieces, not necessarily reviews, although you can add a review as the last type of article here. A brief description of the methodology used for the collection and analysis of data. So some reviews actually have a methodology for how they have reviewed studies, and that's fine. But you don't want somebody else's opinion of the summary of the research. So if it's actually done like a study and it has a methodology and some methods and some key terms, those kinds of things, you can use a review article. Otherwise, we're looking for individual studies. And here is where, because this is a research methods course, you might want to make some comments about the methodology or design of the course. Does the way they study it, is it congruent with what they're studying? Do you think that their sample size is too small or too large? Or do you have some questions about the way they did the study? Or Alternatively, do you think the study is very well done for the question asked? And of course, that's asking you to make some judgments based on very little experience. But the more you read about these things, I think the more you see that some studies really outline very carefully how they did what they did, and that makes you more confident in maybe believing any kind of conclusion they make at the end. So think about that. This word conclusion, as I said, is problematic, but people make them all the time. And do they sound like they're hedging, like they're understanding their own biases, or do they sound like does it sound like propaganda, like they're trying to convince you something? So these are the kinds of things you're going to take into account this time. And of course, you don't have a lot of place to write this. And so something has to go. And so what's going to go in this one is in the first set of annotated bibliographies you did, you were probably looking at the authors, their qualifications, the universities they come from, etc. Of course, you're going to notice that, but this time that doesn't have to make up part of your annotation, so that should shorten it quite a bit. We now assume that you're looking at those things, and so if the person is publishing, for example, and they're not university professors, what other reason do you have to believe that they have the research skills in order to be able to make the conclusions they make? Those kinds of things. So we kind of assume that you've gone through that information now, that you've been through that process. You also want to talk about how this article can help you on the way of your own research, how it's applicable, why you chose it to be a part of these 5. Do not include biographical information about the authors, and no more than one article from a professional journal or a source other than a peer-reviewed journal article. So that includes Ministry of Education reports, etc. Although those can provide valuable information, and that's why we're allowing you to have one. Again, it's a situation where people are viewing it through a lens, and there is no peer review, and so we are a little bit suspicious of anything from those areas, even though the information can be really informing and important to what you do. So we're allowing you to include one, but you have to understand that anything not peer reviewed is something that you have to look at a little bit more carefully. Title pages. Title page has to use APA 7 format, and you can look that up at OWL at Purdue is one of the best places. Please, your description, your title of your paper should be descriptive. So it shouldn't just say annotated bibliography. It should be maybe about what your topic is. So I'll allow you to use your own judgment for what a good title might be. But assignment 3, for example, is not a good title. So think about that. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about part 1. 5 articles. Choose carefully. They can be quantitative or qualitative. And notice as you read all of these things that we've been talking about, what lens are they viewing this through? What methods and methodology have they told you that they're using? If they don't talk about methods and methodology, and yet they say they did a study, how can you decide if this is something that you want to believe or not? What justification do they have for their claims? Again, no opinion pieces, please. Or, book chapters often will just tell you what somebody thinks without bothering to tell you why they think that way, right? And so you could include one as your non-peer-reviewed addition to your bibliography, but understand that we're on the lookout for people who say they know things, but don't have not told you what reason they have or what they have to back that up. What kind of data have they gathered to back that up? And I know that sounds like a very Western paradigm, and it is still. These things read often like science lab reports. But once we get used to them, they become quite useful. My advice to you is when reading articles, read the abstract, decide if it's worthwhile or not, and if it's not, just toss it right away. Don't spend a lot of time on something that you think is just not going to be where you need it to be, because sometimes that ends up being a waste of time, unless it's really attractive to you and you think it might pull you in a certain direction. Read the abstract. If it's not what you're looking for, throw it out. Don't use it. If you read the abstract and it interests you, then my trick is to go to the end of the article and read kind of the conclusion. And if the conclusion is something that you think is interesting and might help you, then go back to the body of the article and start reading through that. And you might want to take yourself some jot notes as you do it. Maybe if you see a quote in there that you really think is pithy, is really good, and you want to make sure that you don't lose it or you don't forget about it, you might want to write it down for yourself in your own notes. But no quotes within annotations. It's not a place to put quotes later on when you're doing more essay type writing. Those quotes might come in very handy, and you might want to write them down as you're reading so you don't lose them or forget where you saw them. But no direct quotes or in-text citations within annotations are typically done, because you are doing very much a summary of what they call a précis of what the article is talking about. So I think that's all I have to say about that. There's no reference list at the end because, of course, the references are embedded in each of the 5 pages for each of the 5 articles that you're going to be doing the annotations for. So that's all I have to say about this one. I'll do another video on the part 2 for the annotated bibliography, where you're going to read some more articles and then start to choose articles and summarize them. But we won't get ahead of ourselves. For now, just the 5 annotated bibliography. I hope that answers your questions. Thanks for listening.